Bought this guitar on Marketplace. They said it worked the last time they used it. It doesn't. So I'm going to open up the electronics to figure out what's going on and see if it can be a simple soldering issue. Stay tuned. First thing we need to think about when we're working on soldering or small projects, we need a small toolbox for small tools. So I have my soldering iron in there. I have my solder that I'm going to use, my solder remover, my solder wick, and a couple of small screwdrivers and other things in there. So it's nice to have a small toolbox for our small tools. So we'll get our soldering iron hooked up. We want to make sure we use caution when using a soldering iron. A lot of heat can be coming from there. And we'll get this guitar fixed up and soldered. So we have our soldering iron on. You can tell by the light there. And that will get hot. So you want to make sure that you keep everything back. It does come with a little kickstand that you kind of can see there. I'm just going to put that on the kickstand while I kind of get everything prepped and while that heats up. So to get to the electronic that I'm looking for here, I just need to take out some of these small screws. And if you really wanted to be organized about this, you get an ice cube tray and you'd put your screws in that. So the only reason that anybody would want to solder something, by themselves is if you have an electronic component that has a bad connection and you pull out the wiring and see soldering on it. So you want to see what it looks like to be able to fix it. We want to make sure we get our wire where we want it, so it's supposed to go through that hole. So we put it through that hole, and so now it is connected, but again, it's loose, nothing's holding it in. So we'll take our solder, we'll take our iron, we'll put the solder right where we want it to go. We'll touch it with our soldering iron, it'll start to heat up, and that's how we solder electronics. Blow on it to cool it down a little bit. You want to make sure you are in a well ventilated area so you don't breathe in those fumes. We'll give this a second to cool off. Make sure we got everything. I'd like to put a little bit more on the other side, and then once I put a little bit more on that far side, I'll be ready to hook this up and test it out and see if that worked or not. So again, you want to make sure you do it in a well-regulated area. I'm going to leave my soldering iron plugged in just to make sure if we need it again, it'll be nice and hot. And we'll see then if this baby is ready to roll. Alright, so if you want to unsolder this joint, our soldering iron's hot now. We're going to take our wick and we're going to put it on where we want to take off the solder. And again, this is piping hot here. And all we're going to do is we're just going to take that wick. We're taking off all of that solder that we don't want on there. And again, we want to make sure we're being careful because this is hot. So you want to make sure you're doing this under the supervision of an adult. Yep, that wire's starting to loosen up there. And you can always, don't forget, you can always use a magnifying glass. I think you got to deal with these small things with, we're moving it around, we don't want to keep it on there. If you're doing electronics, sometimes this can fry your motherboard if you just kind of keep it all on one place. So you want to make sure you use caution. And again, you do not burn yourself or your electronics. Okay, so we just removed that, and again, this might be a little hot, so we got to be careful here. All right, so we got it soldered. Let's see if it works. Before, I wasn't getting any sound whatsoever. So with that one simple solder to hook up that wire to its connection or whatever, let's see if we made it work here. So whenever you're looking at electronics, I used to do this a lot with video games, but any type of electronic that needs some sort of simple connection like that, and you can solder it, cheap soldering kits, 30 bucks. Some solder is pretty inexpensive as well, and you might be able to fix your own electronics. So hopefully you enjoyed. Play some riffs, check out Marketplace for some cheap guitars, and check next week for some new videos. Thanks.